Well, hello, my name's Aurantiago, and welcome to the Red Theater. Becoming a modern pilot with their pristine uniforms and equipment is by no means a detestable career. Some may even find it desirable. Unfortunately, same can't be said about the Soviet pilots who took part in the Great Patriotic War. Their short lives were marked by an unending war of attrition, and even one small mistake would cost them their life. Flimsy Soviet planes were prone to sudden combustions, engine failure, and all manners of technical difficulties. These were only minor problems in the grand scope of things though, as Soviet pilots in the middle of aerial combat could hardly think about such trivial matters. And yet, this did not stop people from idolizing this life. The reason lay within Soviet films of that period, as they glorified and propagated the idealistic life of a soldier. Films of that era would depict pilots defending their homeland from the Nazi menace. One of these films was Neba Moskvy, an hour-and-a-half film which depicts Lieutenant Ilya Streltsov, a pilot who would take part in the Battle of Moscow. The film, A Good Lad, revolves around a French pilot who was shot down and becomes a partisan fighter. Although these films were blatant propaganda, it still had a massive impact on Soviet society. So great was the impact that even a certain boy living in Kutaisi, Rezo Chkheidze, would be inspired by them. His passion for films further fueled by all manner of cinematography. He grew up to be a director that would shake the communist world with one film, and that film would be the topic of this video, A Father of a Soldier. Revaz or Rezo Chkheidze was born in 1926 in the second largest city of the Georgian SSR. Born into a family of writers, Rezo was always in tune with fine arts at a young age. But living with a father that was also a prominent author meant that they didn't manage to survive the Great Purge unscathed. In 1937, the NKVD knocked at the front door of Rezo's house and took David, his father, never to be seen again. David was presumably shot that night outside the city in the forest. This traumatic event led to the young director to appreciate what he had in the moment and an understanding of loss that he used in his films rather well, which had awoken humanistic ideals in him in contrast to the Soviet regime. When he was still in school, his aspirations were to become a pilot even though his talents lay elsewhere. His taste of movies matured over his early teenage days, which slowly developed into an appreciation for the medium. He would depict plays of famous Georgian heroes and loved to act in these plays. That all culminated when he decided that this love for film was his calling all along and enrolled in the Tbilisi State Institute of Theatre in 1943. His major was acting. He would continue to study in Tbilisi until 1946, and after a 3-year hiatus, he would get the rare chance to go study in Moscow, under famous directors Sergei Yudkovich and Mikhail Rom, who were very prominent propagandists during that time period. In a 1996 interview, he recalled the day of Stalin's funeral.
აი იმ დროში და იმ სისტემაში, რომელიც დასრულდა, სწავლა დასრულდა, მას ვლაპარაკობ ოფიციალურად 53 წელს. მაშინ, როდესაც სტალინი გარდაიცვალა. აი აქ კიდე განსაკუთრებული დღეები იყო. სტალინის გარდაცვალება და ჩვენი დიპლომის დაცვა, რომლითაც ჩვენ მივიღეთ ატესტატი პროფესიისა, კინორეჟისორისა, ერთდროულად მოხდა. დამთავრდა სტალინის ეპოქა და ჩვენ დავამთავრეთ უმაღლეს სასწავლებელი. ბევრი ისეთი შემდგომში გამოჩენილი ადამიანები ქართული კულტურის და მახსოვს 9 მარტს დაკრძალვის დღეს ჩვენ სახურავზე ავედით მაღლა, იქიდან ხელის გულივით ჩავდა წითელი მოედანი და მთელი ეს პროცესია, რაც დაკავშირებული იყო სტალინის დაკრძალვასთან და სახურავზე ვიდექით ჩვენ და იქიდან დავყურებდით აი მაწვილები, რომლებიც მომავალ ცხოვრებისთვის მემზადებოდით და იქ ჩვენ ალბათ ფაქტიურად მოხდა ორი დიდი ეპოქის ერთმანეთზე დაშორების დასაწყისი. ეს იყო სტალინის ეპოქა და როდესაც უბო შეიტანეს მავზოლეუმში და გაისმა ზალპები გამოსამშვიდობებელი, ეს იყო ალბათ სწორედ ის, რაც იმ ეპოქის დამშვიდობებასთან იყო დაკავშირებული. თუმცა ეს დამშვიდობება დღესაც კი გრძელდება, კაცმაროთქვას ბევრი რამ შეიცვალა, მაგრამ ჯერ კიდევ ბევრი დარჩა იმ ეპოქიდან. და ეს ჩვენ თითქოს მე ასე დამჭა მეხსიერებაში, როგორც ეპოქა დაშორებისა, აი ამ როდესაც ჩვენ ყბაწულები დიპლომებით ხელში უნდა გამოგზავრებულიყავით სახლში, თბილისში და შევდგომოდით ჩვენ მოღვაწეობას უკვე ჩვენს მშობლიურ ქვეყანაში, საქართველოში.
After his education in Moscow, he made 2 documentary films in Tbilisi, and they were his first real experience making films. In 1949, he made his first full-fledged film that was shown in theaters. And in the beginning of the 60s, he would make 2 movies, Treasure and Zhuispiliki, both of them following the party line. During the filming of Zhuispiliki, Rezo got a bare-bones script from a colleague that he was working with. He asked the overworked director to please read the playwright when he had the time, and Rezo reluctantly agreed. After a very tiring day at the set, an exhausted director sat down in a bus and concluded that he would forget that he ever had the script, decided to read it right then and there. The script was named Father of a Soldier, only 5 pages long. The seemingly simple playwright was anything but. It depicted an elderly father who set out to a military hospital near the front to see his hospitalized son. Reaching the front, a painful reality awaited him. His only son was discharged and sent to the front lines again. Desperate, he set out again, this time directly to the heart of battle, in hopes of meeting him. This kind of story was unseen during the Stalin's era, since the conception of Russian and then Soviet films were all shrouded in a coat of authoritarianism. Unlike in other European countries, the Russian Empire and then the Soviet Empire saw it more as a medium of control. The Russians would make anti-German and nationalistic films during World War I, and as the proletariat revolution was slowly creeping in, more films that were ideologically motivated popped its head out, this time against the Tsarist government. Father Sergei is considered to be the beginning of Soviet cinematography, although other silent films that depicted anti-governmental tendencies might have not been Bolshevik at all. During the formation of RSFSR, a substantial number of films were actually criticizing the actions of the newly formed state after the October Revolution of 1917. In response to that, the state gradually began to tighten the grip over the film industry, even though there were genuine adherents to the state ideology in the beginning of the communist reign. Lenin understood very well the power of the medium. To him, and then his predecessors, it was most powerful defender of communism, more than literature and music. Why? Because the film industry developed alongside the party, and therefore oversight at first was unnecessary. Until a certain someone took over. Stalin was an average film enjoyer and critic. He usually spent his free time watching films in his office with high-ranking Soviet officials, most of the films being first drafts of movies that were set to come out in the Union. Stalin would sometimes ask directors like Mikhail Chiaureli to make propaganda films to boost his own ego. He believed that by changing films, he was changing reality and truth, and to some degree, he was. Films of that era showed happy workers living happy lives, but an external enemy always broke the peace. During and even after the war, films about brave Soviet soldiers were very popular, but they never were even close to reality on the ground. The sets were elaborate, the suits and equipment were more or less accurate, all of this to show Stalin's greatness as a leader and as a head of state. His idea of a perfect Soviet man was achieved during his lifetime, one who believed in the Communist Party with all his heart. one who could go against his own family because of the state. A terror so great that one forgot to think properly about himself. The perfect man was brave, unyielding in the face of death, and most importantly, a loyal tool. But that image immediately crumbled as death knocked on poor old Yosif's door. During the 1960s, the Stalinization was in full swing, and the tight grip on speech was loosened just slightly. That was the time when a new Soviet man was born, not of muscular youth and clean-shaven face, but a scrawny old vineyard farmer in rural Georgian SSR. His appearance on screen had a profound effect on the masses, as they saw the Great Patriotic War in a different light, a more humane and realistic one, a story of a father searching for his son. Before we begin with the review part of this video, I have to tell you, spoilers ahead, and you should probably watch the film. I'll leave a link to it with English subtitles. Okay, now that's done, enjoy the rest of the video. Father of a Soldier is set during the middle of the Great Patriotic War, namely in 1943, when the Soviets pushed out the Southern Army Group around Stalingrad. The film begins with our main character Georgy Makharashvili taming to his vineyard. Looking like a peasant from the Middle Ages, with a scrawny beard and muscular mustache. Gaunt and haggard from worrying over his son, he always looks stoic with a 1,000-yard stare right from the beginning, and it's hard not to. His village, like many others, is desolate, all youth conscripted and sent to the heat of battle. Goderdzi, his one and only boy, has been serving as a tankist for the Soviet army for years. As of now, the young soldier has been put in a military hospital near the front lines, so his father, who probably hasn't seen much outside of Georgia, sets out to see him. Some things I like from the beginning of the movie is that Georgy is almost fully silent in the village scene, and how he manages to take in all the information that is thrown at him, until he had enough of everyone's nagging and bursts, showing off his temper. It shows his humanity and how fallible he is, almost like he's an actual character with motivation. Also an interesting prop in the background is the recruitment poster posted on a wall where he sits in a truck. During the village scene, we see the mother of Goderdzi visibly worried for her son and husband, having to see another man out of the house. It looks to be a hard month for the lonely mother. One very important line from her is, and that's the parting words our hero hears. After a short info dump, Georgy is in a port city looking around for a ride during a parade. He quickly spots a grimy young sailor who offers Georgy a ride.
Ну что, Василий Дмитриевич, долго еще? Ладно, садись, старик. Значит так, 1 билет до Дубова. А за поклажу особая плата.
Хорошо.
Лошадь это тебе не пароход. Ей любая ножка тянет. Да. Ну так что, готовы?
Готов.
Отдать концы!
And they set off. During this scene, Georgy, out of compassion, starts walking part of the road so the children can lay down.
Здорово шагаешь.
Curious, Georgy asks why he wasn't fighting on the front and gets a vague response that the army isn't his job anymore. Georgy simply mutters,
Молодой.
Our hero's characteristics of compassion and understanding is shown when he gives the young man
Тебя закурить найдется?
and talks to the complete strangers about why he was on this journey. Georgy is not a typical strong male archetype. He feels humble and vulnerable, especially when talking about his son. Meanwhile, the former army man is the Soviet man's dream, strongly built, handsome face and all. The only thing disconnecting him from this is the lack of courage, or implied one. But our assumptions are proven wrong when we see the reason behind this. He's a cripple, probably from a shell, and was discharged from service. I love how it was all framed and built up, how you can't see his legs if you pay close attention. But it's always at the end of the screen where most people don't pay attention to. The subtle dialogue with the smirky attitude only shows how bitter he has become and how oppressed he feels. He looked on to the marching parade with angst, and it's relatable. It seems he has not gotten a crumb of courtesy after he got discharged. But at the end, he is fond of the old man that he spent his time with, even though it was short. This is told just from showing the visual narratives and cues that subtly grew intrigue. The small story arc says so much and gives so much representation of how the war really was. It was diverse, it was painful, and many did not get a happy ending, even if you survived or not. Another great scene for character development is when our hero makes it into the hospital and finds out his son has been discharged.
А? Выписался.
Как?
Нет его.
Как нет?
Нету.
Что нет, слушай? Сейчас есть, а сейчас уже нет, да? А?
He storms the gates and asks for proof, forcing the head doctor to come out. He sits down and hears out the angry man, but he, well, falls asleep.
Товарищ военврач. Раненых привезли.
Как чувствует себя капитан?
Плохо. Не переставая просит пантопон.
Then the visibly drained doctor is woken up by the nurse, and he tells the lowly right-hand man to show him the quarters where his boy was staying. There, Georgi meets soldiers that were undergoing treatment and confirms that, indeed, his son was discharged from the hospital.
Не сомневайся, папаша.
Да.
Вылечили его. Да так вылечили, что когда он в клубе танцевал, мест не хватило.
Хорошо танцевал.
Ух, здорово, как птица.
Послушай, отец, ведь ты же можешь с ним повидаться. Ведь его часть в Демидове стоит.
Ну да.
Ребят, когда наведывались к нему, говорили, твой танк, мол, скучает по тебе. Съездил бы к нему.
Как это? Где это? Демидово далеко?
Демидово-то? Здесь, рядом.
А на станции точно узнаешь.
Ну, а кто скажет на...
Комендант?
Комендант все скажет.
Комендант, это такой...
Не.
Я знаю, это комендант.
Не,
такой...
что, никак...
Да ничего, тут
нормальный комендант.
А что?
Еще пропуск даст.
А то?
Да, обязательно
Да даст, папа.
Да даст, я тебе
Я
говорю.
знаю.
А
У тебя
не,
какой документ, откуда приехал? Почему?
А потом вот
Не в этом...
Даст. Фотографию покажешь, даст.
Ну, хорошо. Тогда я поехал. Ну, ладно. Хорошо. Ну, я поехал тогда. Ну, поехал.
Счастливо, папа.
Ну,
Привет
вот.
ему.
Хорошо, подожди. Вот это...
He leaves his bag full of Georgian goodies to the wounded men. Georgi is left to himself after this, disappointed, walking around the rail line. Here he meets a young lad that offers him a smoke, quickly bonding with him.
Как его имя? Его.
Кого? Грузин?
Да.
Какое там имя? На фронте у всех одно имя. Здорово, солдат. Прощай, солдат. Простите, что я болтаю много. Я после контузии долго не мог говорить. Только что из госпиталя вот сразу...
Какой? Это?
Нет, это в другом городе, далеко. Что ж ты в госпитале не узнал? Куда сына? Какую часть направили? А?
Как не узнал, слушай? Что я тогда узнал, если это не узнал? Вот здесь совсем это близко, это...
Демидово.
Демидов.
Так это
видел?
совсем рядом.
Конечно,
Ну,
слушай.
2 часа езды на любом попутном эшелоне.
Я говорю, слушай, здесь близко сидим, покажи. Нет,
Ты что здесь сидишь тогда?
Что я сижу, слушай. Говорю, здесь начальник, говорю, пропусти. Нет. Вчера целый день там, главная станция. Комендант, дорогой, пропусти, вот здесь документ. Нет, говорит, нет. Это документ до сих пор. Сюда нельзя. Отсюда опять поезжай домой.
Вот смотри, плюнь на эти бумажки. Посмотри. Если сейчас остановится...
The lad offers Georgi to go to the front with him, and after a lot of hesitation,
Нет.
he boards a train illegally.
Быстро лезь, Батя! Молодец! На,
Давай.
бери.
Setting off and finally exchanging names. The name of the lad is Arkady. The young soldier is a lively individual in contrast to our main character, very willing to break rules, but that does not seem to affect his professional life much. His blonde hair and generally well-built stature fits the Soviet man aesthetic. Georgi and Arkady become good friends as they get closer to the front. They survive a bombing run and reprimandation from the higher-ups.
Как вы сюда?
Товарищ начальник, я ехал в поезд, машина ехала.
Отец, подожди. Ты понимаешь, товарищ полковник, он приехал к сыну в госпиталь, а сына выписали в часть. Часть находится в Демидово. Ну вот он и поехал.
Не время в гости ездить. Поезжай обратно домой.
Товарищ начальник.
Демидов, отец, уже немцы.
А?
Поезжай, старик, домой и жди сына!
А домой? Что?
Назаров! Устрой старика с ночлегом и утром отправьте с какой-нибудь машиной!
Есть!
Значит, Назаров, да? А как зовут тебя?
Николай.
Николай. Ну что ж, Коленька, исполни приказание полковника, да?
Пошли.
Ну вот. Отец, пойдем. Давай, узелок, давай. Пойдем.
Пошли, отец.
На, закури. Я говорил, что все хорошо выйдет. Я сам из госпиталя. Отец, пойдем скорее. К ребятам работать.
They finally find themselves in a random home, where our hero meets Arkady's platoon and learn about each other while reminiscing about home.
Земляк мой как?
Петро отвоевался уже, из дому письмо прислал. Дочка у него родилась. Да, и вообще ведет гражданскую жизнь. Работа, семья, постепенно отсыпается. Так и мы раньше жили, не находили в этом ничего особенного. Руку ему в госпитале ампутировали.
Ну, это хорошо, хоть жив. А как старшина Коробейников?
Ивана Ивановича уже нет.
Как же все это случилось?
Ранили его сначала. Аннушка потащила его в тыл, и обоих мина накрыла.
Славная была девчина.
After everyone went to sleep, Georgi hears the sound of rumbling tanks outside and runs out into the night. He screams the name of his son as the T-34s roll in a line. The scene is shot in the dark with very strong contrasting lighting. almost like it's in black and white. For him, it's a moment of despair, and it finally sinks in that he might not see his son for a very long time. Georgi goes back into the house and starts talking to himself. He feels like he was forced to go, and he ended up in a dead end in a random family's house with nothing to go back with. No information, no son, nor the will to do anything. Our protagonist starts blabbering. To him, it does not sink in why one would want to go to war. He is blinded by the isolation and stability.
Здесь женщина стреляет, мальчишка стреляет. Все стреляет. Мой сын уже на сами пронто. Куда меня сейчас езжает? На сами пронто.
In the morning, a battle began to rage. A fierce firefight between the Soviets and Germans broke out. The sounds of war chimes threw the young men into the battle, like a moth into a flame, and our protagonist runs away from the fray of war, screaming to his friend,
Аркадий, говорил я тебя, не надо ехать, не надо, вот и раз.
Our hero runs into a field after some time running. Under heavy bombardment, he keeps on running and then passes out. As he wakes up, he sees that the wheat is on fire and begins to fight the flames. Sounds of gunfire is in the background, but he does not falter, as he asks for help to put out the fire. Then it cuts to the German offensive, where the Germans somehow manage to materialize AK-47s? The Soviets are outnumbered and obviously outgunned, but they retreat fighting. In the middle of all this, Georgi happens to be there. He sees firsthand the destruction the Nazis cause. Arkady defends the old man as the onslaught comes nearer and nearer. Arkady during the battle gets wounded, but Georgi doesn't leave him, picks the young man up and keeps on running.
Еще не бойся. Я сам не бойся. Еще немного.
Our protagonist finds a ditch where they begin to hide. He tends to Arkady's wound.
Подожди.
Georgi starts to look around for a path they can sneak out from, and then... Arkady is killed by a German soldier. Our hero, seeing with his own two eyes the horrors of humanity, loses himself in anger and kills the German soldier.
Подожди.
Taking his first life, he is distraught, realizing the answer to the question he asked in the family's home. The scene hard cuts into a dark room of commanding officers talking about strategies, but after some discussion we see where they are. They're in a trench in the middle of a forest, and as one of the commanding officers leaves the trench, we see soldiers flock to him, begging him to take in the lonely grandpa that presumably has been with the unit for a week now, fighting like the others.
Что он воевать сможет, не хуже всех нас.
Мы все вас просим. Помогите. Прекратите разговоры.
Товарищ лейтенант, доложите, что я беру его под свою ответственность в свой взвод.
Доложите,
Только
хороший
пусть
человек.
разрешат зачистку. Уверяю вас, он нам совсем не помешает.
Да даже наоборот, он крепкий.
Все вас просим.
Попросите еще раз.
Да так, ерунда, не стоит время тратить.
Ну, а все-таки?
Да старик тут один грузин привязался. Хочет, чтобы я его в часть взял. Я ему объяснял. Ничего слушать не хочет. Упрям как...
А где он? Он здесь, товарищ генерал. Третий день войти просится.
Так позовите, пусть войдет.
Есть! Старик, давай!
Ты чего такой сердитый, отец?
Потому что я умное слово хочу слышать. Наконец. А здесь я только слышу, что ты старый. Тебе трудно будет здесь.
After some time, the lieutenant just bluntly explains why he doesn't want an old-timer fighting on the front lines. But the persistent Georgi just keeps the pressure and even tells the lieutenant that he's willing to wrestle with the men here.
Давай бороться. Если кто-нибудь меня здесь сейчас поборол, то тогда я ничего не скажу, прямо поеду домой.
Вот дает старик.
Нет, не надо смеяться. Вот давай бороться.
One young boy steps up, saying that he's willing to humor the old man, but Georgi bluntly refuses, stating that it would be too unfair. At the end, they take our hero in, and well, he has to do laundry in the back lines. He leaves his post and rushes to a battle in the trenches. As he makes it to the trench, he is immediately swept in the battle.
Махарашвили? Здравствуй. Куда? Махарашвили!
A general offensive has been ordered, and thus began a long, grueling battle to take back the Soviet motherland. Germans fall in numbers as they can't stop the mass of the army they are fighting. As the cold winter night dawned and the tired-out soldiers of the Red Army fell asleep, the music band sneaks around and slips into a ditch. There, they don't waste time and tell the commanding officer that they are here to boost morale. The officer, not wanting to miss the privilege to listen to live music, tells them, after looking at our protagonist longingly,
Что играть?
Сыграйте что-нибудь грузинское.
if they know anything Georgian. They do, and start playing a catchy tune for all, somehow calming the nerves of the sleeping soldiers.
Можно?
Начинайте.
Раз, два.
The sounds of music is cut with the sound of a panzer getting pushed away by a T-34. On the tank we see written "Na Berlin," which just translates to Berlin. A long march has begun in the middle of winter. While going on this stroll, our hero and his gang of ruffians are shit-talking Hitler.
Попробуй, давай.
Полетели Гитлера бомбить.
О, магистр, давай.
Чего-чего?
Это Реномат, это твой Гитлер.
Азаров, Горбатенко, Лобов, Бахрашвили.
When all of a sudden they are ordered for a scouting mission. In the cold snow, they slowly crawl and take cover.
Местность открытая. Осторожно. Пошли.
In one moment, while Georgi and one of his platoon mates are taking cover in a hole, he starts a schizoid rant on the soil.
Земля, слушай, хорош, жирный такой.
It's very obvious that he misses farming and his small village.
Николас, что с тобой, слушай? Вот он говорит. Давай, говорит. Уже пора, говорит. Понимаешь? Уже весна пришел, говорит. Уже это...
Сеять?
Да. Нет, слушай. Сперва это...
Пахать?
Да. Сперва пахать. Да. Это, понимаешь? Сперва пахать. Потом сеять. Пахать, сеять. Пахать, сеять.
As they crawl, our protagonist hits something with his foot, and it happens to be a border sign.
Hey! What?
They made it. All the suffering has come to this moment, for the men had finally made it to the border. They pushed out the Germans, even though partially. Georgi screams to his squad that he has found it. Happiness floods into their eyes as they lift up the sign and can't keep their voices anymore.
Видишь, уже пришли. Слушай, вот это, как называется? Вот это. Николас, бичо.
Ребята! Сюда! Сюда!
Что ты кричишь?
А я не кричу, отец! Сюда! Давай! Товарищ старший сержант!
Тихо.
Дошли до государственной границы. Союз Советских Социалистических Республик.
Давайте поднимем.
Давайте.
Подожди. Вот, давай. Давай. Медленно.
Ну,
Да. Так, вот так. Вот. Еще.
вот.
Так. Давай. Вот.
The victory screeches of is heard over the snowy wilderness. On the truck going into a German city, we see Georgi with his platoon stumbling upon a fairly recent set of graffiti. Written on the walls, «Здесь первым прошли танки старшего лейтенанта Махарашвили», which translates to, "The first to cross this were the tanks of Senior Lieutenant Makharashvili." Our hero jumps at the sight of his son's name on the wall, rushing towards it and is overjoyed knowing that he is another step closer to him.
Отец, куда ты?
Вот, это. Задержи колонну! Эй, танки! Лейтенант Махарашвили. Hey! Махарашвили!
Because of this, he holds up the whole army that is behind him. The camera pans out to let us see the decimated city as surrendered Germans walk the filthy streets. Outside the city, we see a line of tanks next to a vineyard. When our hero saw this, he rushed towards the scrappy farm and started to tame it as if it was his own, singing to it, petting it and cleaning it, all while he mutters to himself.
Enak saydan kaçtı. Barakiano şena. Ha? Şenha vena.
He looks genuinely happy, finding a moment of respite amidst the despairing war. Seeing the tanks, he rushes towards them, hoping to see his son. He asks one of the drivers if he knows Goderdzi, but the reply is a no.
Слушай, сынок, я...
Между прочим, в армии положено обращаться друг к другу по фамилии или по званию. Я старшина.
Есть. Разрешите обратиться, товарищ старшина?
Я вас слушаю.
Дружок, дорогой, понимаешь, что сын у меня здесь. Я его ищу. Танкист он.
Как фамилия?
Махарашвили. Годердзи. Высокий такой, красивый.
Состав?
А?
Я спрашиваю, рядовой или офицер?
Лейтенант он.
Нет, такого не знаю.
After some persistence, he starts to walk away as a tank begins to move. It tramples over the vines, and this is the reaction we get.
Подожди! Стой! Стой! Подожди! Эй! Стой, говорю!
Ты что, с ума сошел? Лезешь под самую машину?
Это я сошел с ума или ты сошел с ума? Что ты сделал? Слушай, это же виноград, не видишь?
Что ж тут особенного?
Щенок, ты!
Как вы смеете? Смирно! Вы что, не подчиняетесь команде старшего? Серегин, ко мне! Убери этого старика, или я за себя не отвечаю!
Я тебе покажу!
Уходи отсюда.
Подожди, слушай.
Уходи, тебе говорят.
Отойди, я тебе говорю.
Уходи.
Отойди! Ну, Урепшан, вот еще.
Давай.
Ребята! Иди сюда. Иди, посмотри. Посмотри, что ты наделал здесь. Посмотри. А? Что ты сделал? Что? А? Не видишь, что здесь виноград? Что у тебя дороги нету, да?
А ты видел, что они у нас делали?
Это они делали. А ты? Что? Фашистом стал, да? Иди сюда. Вот немецкий мальчик. Иди. Стреляй. Стреляй.
Скажешь тоже. Что я, фашист, что ли?
А виноград тебе не жалко, да? Это же живой случай. Ему не больно, да? Ты его не сажал, ты его не пахал. Ты только виноград кушать любишь. Такой молодой, еще ни одно дерево не посадил. Такой сад портишь. Не стыдно тебе?
Ну ладно, отец. Ты тоже лишнего на себя не бери, тут война, а не парк культуры.
Пошли, отец.
Давай назад. Давай танк назад.
Поехали, Саша. Давай назад.
This is the only movie in the Soviet cinema that I know of that has a junior commit violence against a senior officer. Georgi calls him out because they don't take care of what is precious and trample over people's livelihoods and sometimes even dreams. Georgi says that
Ты его не сажал, ты его не пахал. Ты только виноград кушать любишь. Такой молодой, еще ни одно дерево не посадил. Такой сад портишь. Не стыдно тебе?
Ну ладно, отец.
alluding that he takes but never gives, and that he takes the fruits of others' labors. He says that he hasn't lived a life of hard work where he creates, and so he tramples over others' creations, and only takes the fruit that is sweet to him. After this encounter, Georgi is contemplating what has become of his son. Even his platoon mates are aware of his gloom.
Мрачный, говорю.
Устал я, верно, товарищ старший сержант. Вот думаю я, какой стал теперь мой сын Кодерти. Он был такой добрый.
A deadly urban fight is underway. Hostages are held on the third floor of a massive building complex, and the mission is to save them.
Товарищ старший лейтенант, видите это здание? Там первые 2 этажа занимают немцы, а на 3-м укрепились наши. Задача вашей роте – уничтожить врага и освободить наших. Есть?
The Red Army storms the buildings, guns blazing. Many men drop like flies as the German position is held firm on the 2nd floor. Surrounded, the Soviets gave the Germans a chance to surrender under the Geneva Conventions.
Слушайте все. Во избежание напрасного кровопролития командование советской армии предлагает вам, окруженным в городе и блокированным в домах немецким солдатам и офицерам, прекратить огонь, немедленно сложить оружие, поднять белые флаги и сдаться. Командование советской армии гарантирует всем вам жизнь и безопасность. Оно обеспечивает вам нормальное питание. Всем раненым и больным будет оказана медицинская помощь. На обдумывание этого ультиматума и сдачу вам дается 2 часа. Все не сдавшиеся в этот срок будут уничтожены. Время ультиматума началось. Московское время 23 часа 30 минут. 14 апреля 1945 года.
The ultimatum is set and the firefight has finished. Silence fills the air. In this ghost-quiet moment, the men share their desires of homely love. Some talk about their loved ones, some want to sleep in their bed, and some just want a warm meal.
Когда приеду домой, лягу в постель и буду спать. Спать и спать.
А я думаю, никого не предупреждать. Заявлюсь, как снег на голову. Там, у нас во дворе, сзади, есть калитка. Вот через нее я и войду. Только Нюрка, наверное, все равно увидит.
During this moment of reprieve, they hear singing, and this wakes the old man from his slumber. Hearing his native language is pleasantly surprising, and then he recognizes the voice.
ქართველი ხარ, ბიჭო?
ქართველი ვარ, შემიჭრილე.
საადაური ხარ? ჰა?
გურჯანი დაბა.
It's Goderzi, his son.
გოდარდი! გიორგი ვარ, გიორგი, мама შენი მამა ძაღლოშენა, იქის ლივარ გნახე. Годарди!
Полчаса осталось им на раздумье.
Лежат. Человеку не дают с сыном встретиться.
Ави! Ави!
Хей! ახალაშვილო, ახა.
დედა, ჩვენში თუ წვიმს. ალაზანზე.
მაისის წვიმა სერაჟოვია, ბიჭო.
იმენახე როგორ დატოვე, მამი?
ძალიან ბარაქი არის კი გამოდგა ისინი ჩაყრილი ვაზი. ღვინოც ერიგიანი დგება თურმე. ხოდარ, ბიჭო!
Опять начали.
The fighting broke out again. And sounds of artillery filled the rumbling building. They stormed the second floor as tensions amount. The Germans surrender in droves.
еще есть!
Давай, за мной!
Подожди! За мной! За мной! Пошли, ребята!
And after that, something unnerving happens.
Подожди! Ай, подожди. Подожди. Швило. Рого газдир. И чё? А? Я мудила гамхтер. Швило.
This always makes me cry. The cinematography, the respect from the soldiers, the dialogue is all perfect. Amazing acting by Sergo Zakariadze. His expressions make it all the much better, even though it isn't shown that well. It feels so real. This man is just tired of it all and absolutely done with everything. The film ends with the Red Army marching forward after another sorrowful scene from this war. And after a brief stop at a bridge, with the same message as before, the first to cross this were the tanks of Senior Lieutenant Makharashvili. During the checking process of the film, Rewaz was denied initially by the committee to release it to the public because of how it depicted violence against a senior officer. And even after pleading, the only thing he could do was huff and puff. But after Soviet higher-ups watched the film themselves to see what was up, they were happy to release the film as it was. This really gives a good sense of how the Soviets loosened the grip of power over artists. With the release of the film, it was a massive sensation as people watched, felt and rooted for the lowly farmer from Georgia, even winning several awards for its excellency. He was a great example of ambition, hard work, humility, and most of all, humanity. He was admired by a lot of people and loved by his countrymen. But I want to propose a more sinister idea to you all. The movie that I described to you isn't really going against the party line as one might think. Why would the Soviets just make an exemption to this random Georgian film? Of all films that depict hard anti-Soviet symbolism as this whole vineyard scene. Well, let us analyze this further in detail. Georgi Makharashvili is a farmer that mostly signifies ambition. Seeing how much he achieves during the movie, it's hard to imagine him representing something else. But yet, he is hampered by the fact that he is old. All of this is also seen in his son, with his goals lining up with his age, making him a much more desirable man in the cold eyes of the state apparatus. He is the youth of Georgia, and its future, but all of this is taken away, trampled like the tankists trampled over the vineyard. A more direct way of seeing it would be, even if it was the awful conflict that took Goderdzi's life, it doesn't matter. The future of a country has been taken away, and therefore the future of the peoples. It's a harsh reality that they have to live in, but what's worse is the treatment of the main character during the film. Georgi, outside of Georgia, is treated as a senile grandpa that happens to be of use after Arkadi's death, his one friend that he made during the voyage. The scene where our hero joined the ranks of the troops feels more like a child asking his father to take in a dog. Even if it was on the basis of respect and understanding of his zeal, it doesn't change the fact that such behavior looks just sad because of the context. Another scene that gives the impression of respect but is in reality sad on a second thought is the band scene, where the small commanding officer asks the small orchestra if they knew anything Georgian, and they play a Georgian tune. All these small details give you the impression that Georgians really are just subjects of the Russians/Soviets, and that even if they are ambitious, they still die for the wars of others. This symbolism just adds up to it being as much of a pro-Soviet film as any other during that time period. Georgians were the ones building their own prison and then contemplating the fact they were stuck in this situation. In conclusion, Father of a Soldier is a movie that set out to break boundaries, but in a controlled environment benefiting only the party. To sum it up, a very symbolic film was twisted and made into a pitiful display of self-inflicted colonialism. Even if you take all the humanistic and loving ideals from the movie, it leaves a gaping hole for the people it was made for. I think it's time we stop dancing to the tune of this movie and become the Georgis and Goderdzis that will take ambition by its hand.